Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to show you how to make one of these cathedral window blocks. It looks quite difficult to do, but actually it's a lot easier, especially using this method. And when you join several together, it looks quite impressive. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to make this one block in this video and a couple of variations of this same block. So let's get started and I'll show you how it's done. For one cathedral window block, cut 8 squares of any fabric you like. They can be all the same colour like mine or all different colours. It's entirely up to you. They can be any size you like. Mine are 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. Then cut another 4 squares the same size of different fabric. First take your 8 squares of fabric and fold them in half diagonally to make triangles and then press. Make sure that all of your points match up nicely. Continue to press all 8 squares of fabric. Then take one of your 4 squares of pattern fabric and place 2 triangles on top of it like this. I like to use one of my glue pens and put a blob of glue in each of the corners. Where the points of the 2 plain triangles meet, it just holds them in place a little bit better. And then pin or clip round the edge of your squares. Continue adding your triangles of fabric to your squares of fabric until you have done all 4 of them. Then when they are all pinned or clipped together, you need to sew around all 4 sides, but you only take 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you're sewing around all of the edges, taking 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And when you get to the corners, finish with your needle down, lift your presser foot up, pivot, and then carry on sewing to the next corner. Be very careful when you get to the corners where the joins are. If you have glued them, it does make life a little bit easier, but still be very careful as you go around these corners. When you've sewn around all 4 of your squares, line them out like this and then you can sew them together. So take the top 2, place the right side over the left and then pin or clip down the right hand side, making sure that you match up those corners really well. And just open it out to check and make sure it looks okay, and then do the same with the bottom 2. Place the right side over the left side and then pin or clip down the right hand side, and again check to make sure you've done it right. Then at your sewing machine, sew, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I back tack at the start and the finish. When you've finished the first 2, so go straight on to the second 2 and sew those together. Taking your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and removing any pins or clips as you go along. Then press your seams. I like to press these seams open because there's a lot of bulk in them. I think it works better if you press the seams open rather than just to the left or to the right. So finger press first and then press with a nice hot iron, and do the same to both of your pieces. Now take the top 2 pieces and fold them over the bottom 2 pieces and then pin in place, making sure that you line up the centre seam. And once you're happy that you've got your centre seam lined up, carry on and pin or clip the rest of the way along this seam, ready for sewing. And then sew together, taking 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, back tacking at the start and the finish, and removing any pins or clips as you go along. And this is how your first finished block should look. If you want to make more, go ahead and make more. Now press this seam open. First finger press it and then press with a nice hot iron. And this is how your block should look so far. You'll notice now that your block has 4 openings, all in a diamond shape. And for the first variation, if you start by pulling back one side of one of the openings, not too far. If you pull it too far like this, it's no good. You need to pull it so far back, about half an inch probably, or a little bit less, 3/8 of an inch. Put a pin in it and that will hold it in place. And then do exactly the same with the other side and put a pin in it. There. Start to see the effect already. Turn it around and do exactly the same with the next opening. Pull it back just far enough that it doesn't start to lift up at the corners. Put a pin in it and do exactly the same with the other side, and there we can start to see the coloured fabrics showing through. And you can do this all the way around until you've done all 4 of them, and then sew all the way around about 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. And this is how it will look once you've stitched all the way around the edges, but we'll go into that more detail on the next variation. And the next option is to add a square of fabric in the centre. Now I've cut this square to be 5 inches by 5 inches, so it's half an inch bigger than the original squares that we cut. I also cut this square on the bias to make sure that the chevrons are all pointing in the right directions, but the best idea here is to use a non-directional fabric, and then you won't need to worry about that. Put a few pins in to hold this square in place before we start folding down the edges to secure it properly, and make sure that you line up all of the points of this square with the corners to make sure that it's all nice and square. And then you can start to fold over the edges the same way as we did before to hold this square in the centre nice and securely in place. So again, I'm folding over, I'd say about 3/8 of an inch. And then of course we have to sort out the points here. So fold one side over the other and make sure that you've caught in all of your square of fabric, so none of it's going to be missed out when you sew. And then put a pin in this corner. I usually readjust while I'm at the sewing machine and sewing, so don't worry too much about it, but try and make sure that you've got all your fabric caught under, and carry on doing exactly the same all the way around this square until you've done all 4 sides, making sure that we fold one side over the other on these corners, and we're going to sew right up into the corner to secure it all. So once we've got it right, put a pin in it to hold it in place. Carry on folding all 4 edges over and make sure that you overlap the points. Next, you need to sew all the way around the edges to secure it all in place. I like to start on one of the points holding the square in place. So lower your needle, lower your presser foot, and then very carefully start sewing. I also back tack at the beginning here. So back tack and then start sewing very carefully all the way around the edge of the bit that you turned over to hold your square in place, and we're staying as close to the edge as we can get. And as I say, going nice and slowly and gently moving your fabric around. You don't need to lift up your presser foot and pivot here. You just gently go around the curve, easing it round with your hands and pulling the pins out as you go along. And as we get to this first corner here, I'm just readjusting it and make sure that everything's neatly tucked under, and then I carry on sewing and I sew all the way up to the top of the point. And if it's a bit tricky, like here, I just use one of my long pins to push the fabric under and carry on all the way around to the top. And then when I get to the top, I'm going to finish with my needle down, lift my presser foot and then pivot, and I'm going to carry on back going down the line that I've just sewn until I get to the part where the next side meets, and again I'm going to lift up my presser foot, pivot so that I can carry on round the next side, and again gently carry on sewing round the next side. There's no rush, do it nice and slowly so you don't go off the edge which is not what we want to do. So stay close to the edge, but don't go over onto the printed fabric in the middle. You're going to stay on your blue fabric, but close to the edge. And as I get to about the centre of the seam, as I am here, I just readjust that corner and carry on going. And again, I'm going to carry on all the way around and right up into that corner. Here's my pin again to hold it down, and all the way up to that corner. Finish with my needle down, lift my presser foot, oh sorry I was a bit late there, lift my presser foot up, and again carry on back down where I've just sewn, follow the line that I've just sewn down, and then finish with my needle down and pivot again and carry on. And keep going all the way around until you get back to where you started from. And that's the centre square finished, and I just like to back tack at the end, and then you can start around the outer edge. So again, I like to back tack at the beginning and then carry on sewing all the way around and continue sewing. No need to break off the end of each section, keeping your stitches about 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. And when you get back to where you started from, just back tack at the end. And this is how your finished block will look. You can make lots of them and join them all together if you like. Another way to do this block is to just use one folded triangle of fabric over your square and arrange it just like this. And then join your top 2 squares together and your bottom 2 squares together. Pin or clip together and then sew together, taking 1/4 of an inch at your sewing machine. And then join your top 2 squares to your bottom 2 squares by folding the top 2 over the bottom 2, and then pin or clip in place and sew together at your sewing machine. Press your seams open and it will look just like this. And you're going to do exactly the same as before. Fold back those triangle edges by about 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch and put a pin in to hold it in position, and do the same to all 4 sides. Fold the corners over exactly the same as you did when you put the square in the centre. Make sure that one side overlaps the other and then pin in place. And again here you can do exactly the same as we did with the other and adjust when you get to the sewing machine. I'm starting at one of the points and I'm actually going to back tack first. So a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches backwards, and then just carry on all the way around. There's no need to stop and break your thread at any point. Just carry on sewing all the way round in one continuous go. When you reach about the halfway point of one of your sides, just check to make sure that your point is all in line and one side is overlapping the other. And then sew all the way up to the top of the point before pivoting and turning back round and going down the next side. Continue sewing all the way around about 1/16 of an inch from the edge, and then when you reach the point where you started from, back tack and you're finished. Give it a press and then trim off any loose ends, and that's your third variation all finished. And this is the finished 3 cathedral window variations of an easy cathedral window block. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, here are a couple of other videos on my channel that you may also like. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.